Chance's bird. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Thanks for joining us. We're going to give folks just a little bit of time to join. In the meantime, we would love to know if you're joining us. We'd love to know a little bit about who's out there in the webinar. So if you can follow the QR code here on the right-hand side, pop out your phone and follow the link and answer just a few short questions about yourself so we know who's joining us and how much experience you have working with CBN. We would love to hear from you. And we've also got a link to this in our agenda. Rachel, would you be able to grab that link and drop it in the chat for me, please? For the Mentimeter.
Yeah.
Thank you. That way, if QR coding doesn't work for you today, you can follow the link in the chat once it pops up there.
Okay, I got it.
You know, I always Great. So if you're just joining us, there's a link that just showed up in the chat, or there's this QR code, and it's to a short Mentimeter poll. We're really curious who's joining us today and what your experience is with California Biodiversity Network. So please fill that out, and we'll look at it in just a minute.
So Megan, I was able to share where I am from, but then it says presenter hasn't changed slides yet on the Mentimeter. So just letting you know.
Thank you. I thought I had adjusted that, but it looks like I haven't. Let me fix that real quickly. Thanks for noting that. Sorry, they changed the settings on these. Here we go. All right. If you've given it a try and it wasn't working to advance, you want to try it again. So Gary, that's see a thumbs up from you. Great. Okay. So you should be able to go through the whole set of 4 questions now. Thank you. Okay. Looks like we're at just almost 100 folks. Had about a little over 200 register. So really glad that you all are taking time to join us. Excited to have our first town hall. Give it just another minute so people can join. If you've just joined, the QR code on the screen here is to a short poll with 4 questions about where you're coming from, so we know who's joining us. So if you could please fill that out. There's also been a link in the chat. Drop it again. You can follow that link if you prefer to do it on your desktop rather than your phone. Okay. Looks like we're slowing down with folks joining us, so I'll go ahead and kick us off. Thank you all for joining us for the very first California Biodiversity Network Town Hall. I'm very excited to do something as an entire network to bring everybody together and share information and also get some feedback from you all on what we do as we move into the second half of trying to meet our goals to reach 30 by 30. So I'm Megan Jennings. I am on the California Biodiversity Network Steering Committee, and I'm going to sort of MC us today. So thanks for joining, and I'll help guide us through the day, but you're going to hear from a lot of different folks who play a number of different roles in CBN, and we hope that you will participate in sharing your voice because you all are a very critical part of CBN as well. So we're going to take a quick minute and we're going to do some steering committee introductions, and then as we go later in the webinar, you'll have a chance to meet some of the other folks who are joining us. But as I said, I'm Megan Jennings. I'm a research scientist at San Diego State University. My pronouns are she, her, and I sit on the steering committee and focus on partnerships. And I'll pass it to Sam.
Hi, everyone. Sam Veloz from Point Blue Conservation Science. Pronouns are he, him. I co-chair the Systematic Conservation Planning Roundtable, and I will pass it to Liz.
Hey everyone, I'm Liz Chamberlain. I am Director of Innovation with Point Blue Conservation Science and also sit on the steering committee of the California Biodiversity Network, and I co-chair the Stewardship Roundtable with Dawn Hankins. And I will pass off to Rebecca.
Hi everyone, I'm Rebecca Johnson. I direct the Center for Biodiversity and Community Science at the California Academy of Sciences. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm on the steering committee, and I co-chair the Community Science and Biodiversity Informatics Roundtable, and I will pass it to Gary.
Hey everyone, I'm Gary Bocciarelli. I work with the University of California at Davis and with the UC Natural Reserve System. I serve as the chair for the Sentinel Site Network and also sit on the steering committee. And I'll turn it over to Steve Monfort.
Hi, everybody. I'm Steve Monfort. I'm the Executive Director of the UC Natural Reserve System. My pronouns are he, him, and I serve as the co-chair of the California Biodiversity Network. Steering committee, sorry.
And let's pass it to maybe Jeanette.
Hi, everybody. Jeanette Howard. I'm a director of science at the Nature Conservancy based in San Francisco, and I am co-chair with Steve on the CBN steering committee. Pass it over to Rachel.
Hi, I'm Rachel Olaf-Yang. I am a scientific technical support for the California Biodiversity Network, and I also support the California Natural Resources Agency supporting the Pathways to 30 by 30 team. And I will pass it off to, let's see, June.
Thanks. Hi, I'm June Bondo. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the executive director of the California Native Plant Society and serve on the steering committee with a focus on equity. And I think, Dina, I'll pass it to you.
Hi, I'm Dina Spatz, and with the California State Parks. I serve on the steering committee and also support as a co-chair on the Sentinel Site Network Roundtable. I'm going to pass it to you, Megan, in case there's anyone left.
I think we've hit all of our steering committee members. Did I miss any of you? Okay, great. So we'll hear a little bit more about what is the steering committee and what do we do today. And we're also going to hear from some other key partners who are playing an important role. So folks who co-chair our roundtables, and we also have an important group of people who've been helping to guide development of this town hall, as well as help us in expanding what we want to do to grow our partnership, both in terms of breadth and depth. And so you'll get to hear from them. They've been playing a really important role, and I thank them for all the effort. But I'm going to introduce them a little bit later in the session, right before they have an opportunity to speak. And before we move forward, I want to make sure that we're really clear about what we want to try and accomplish today. Since this is our first town hall, we wanted to set some really clear goals to be sure to share information about what CBN has been up to, what our accomplishments have been across the entire network. We've been working for a few years now to reach 30 by 30 goals, but we have a lot of work left to go, and we want to make sure that the network is reflective of what you need. So to that end, we also hope today to find out what you as CBN members, what you need from the network and how that would help you accomplish our collective biodiversity conservation goals. So we'll be doing a bit of information sharing and then also information gathering and, get your input and perspectives on how we can shape CBN for the next 5 years as we continue this really good work. And I'll say that this is just the first of many town halls. We've been doing a lot of work in the roundtables, but I think it's important that we come together every so often and share both our accomplishments and set some new goals together as a group. So we'll be continuing to do this as we move forward. We haven't exactly decided on the time frame, but at least twice a year or so, depending on what the need is to share information back and forth. So I wanted to set the stage there to let you know that this is not just a one-time thing, but we plan to continue doing this. So I'm going to take a minute. Thank you all for filling out the Mentimeter. Let's check out who is joining us. Great. Give it a second to go into present. There we go. Okay, so I asked the question, where are you located? Looks like we have a lot of folks from the Central Coast, which is, I included Bay Area there. So if you weren't sure exactly where you fit into my somewhat arbitrary geographic separations. So nice to have you all there. A lot of folks from the South Coast, that's where I am. So thank you for joining us. And in particular, I want to take a moment and appreciate those of you who might be in the LA area who took time to join. I know it's been a rough go since the beginning of the year, and we have more things happening today with heavy winds. My heart goes out to all of you who have experienced loss and struggle over this time. And as a network, I hope that we are available to you to help in what you need. And for those who can't be here, we are recording this, and we are going to make sure that there is opportunity open to give your feedback at another time, because right now for many of you, and many of you have experienced something like this where you live. It's just made its way to Southern California this year. Understand that your priorities shift when things like this happen. And so not everybody who might want to be here today is here with us. And glad to see that we have some good representation across other parts of the state. And hopefully we can continue to grow that with our efforts to expand. So let's see what kind of organizational breakdown we have. So it's like just a few federal government folks, some state government, a lot of folks in academia. I guess that also includes education. So a number of groups there, and NGOs. So strong representation there. Looks like we could do some more work to bring in tribal partners and our local government folks as well. So I take note of these things, and we'll be planning to do some outreach and engagement to make sure that we're reaching folks who want to participate in this work together. So this one was really to gauge what is your familiarity and how much do you know. So for those of you who are the 27 who said you don't know a whole lot and you're here to learn more, we're going to take it back and give you some real basics and walk through our structure and help you figure out where you might fit and help you see yourself in the work. And for those of you who, maybe are not super active, or you've been active and you want to make sure how you're dedicating your time is effective, hopefully you'll find something here for yourself today. And for those of you who are regular participants and attendees, thank you for your commitment and for being here today to share what you've experienced and how we can continue to grow and serve you. And then finally, okay, it looks like we have a lot of folks who are not active in a roundtable. So this is part of why we wanted to hold the town hall. We recognize not everybody is active in a roundtable or really knows what roundtable fits them. So hopefully we can clear some of that up today, and also in some of the information we share based on what we hear from you today. So I think this was really helpful for me. I hope it's helpful for you to see who else is out there in webinar land when you don't get to see folks. So thanks for participating in this. I'm going to stop sharing that and move back to our slide deck. Switching around. Okay, so I'm going to pass it off to Steve Montfort, one of our fearless leaders in the steering committee, to help tell you a little bit about what is CBN. So for those of you who came looking for information, here we go.
Great. Thank you, Megan. So we're going to start at the beginning and talk about what our purpose is. And so as it stands today. And so I'll put this on the screen. You can read that and I'll fill in the gaps. I mean, we started in 2021 and we were part of the 30 by 30 partnership. And initially the group was asked to help generate an Appendix D that was released that talked about the science in support of 30 by 30. And but ultimately, we see ourselves as a convener and a connector of diverse sectors and engaging lots of different stakeholders, scientists and educators, stewards, practitioners, government folks, et cetera, like is being reflected in the attendance today. And we function as a community of practice. We have hundreds of scientists and stewards and others that are currently working with us to help understand and prioritize the work we're doing around biodiversity protection and stewardship, environmental education, and science. So we want to make it really super clear that we're 100% supportive of helping the state get to its 30 by 30 goals. And there's 5 more million acres that need to be added. And we want to be part of helping to determine, how those lands can be considered and conserved. And also, we're very interested in understanding how lands that are already durably conserved as part of 30 by 30 are performing. Is biodiversity being sustained in the way that we expect it to be? So I just want to finish this by saying our purpose and our evolution really is reflective of the people who joined us in the beginning at the start. And so we realize this introduces certain types of biases, perhaps, in terms of our interest. So you're going to hear a repeating theme. We're actively seeking to be more inclusive and to recognize and acknowledge that there's a tremendous diversity of ongoing work to sustain biodiversity ongoing in California. And we want to hear about that and engage with you on that. Next slide. If you think about what our shared vision is, I would just say we're looking for better conservation outcomes. We want to see improved health and resiliency of California's ecosystems. We have equitable opportunities across the board for folks to be engaged in conservation in California, and again, more diverse and inclusive partnerships. And so to fill in around this, I would say we're really looking to be yes, it's 30 by 30, and that's something we're in to support. But I think we all understand that we're in for the long haul. We're the biodiversity people. We understand the biodiversity will need to be conserved, in perpetuity. And this is what we're here to do. So we'll be here, we hope, way beyond 20 by 30, 2030. We're going to get there, but we need to continue. And I guess I would just step back and say that all of us are probably beginning to sort of grapple with the reality of the new political realities that we have with political and policy changes that are being implemented at the federal level. I just would say that, for all of us that, we need to maintain ourselves, not be distracted, because again, we are in this for the long haul. And, we have to stay focused on the long-term objective, which ultimately is to sustain biodiversity and functioning ecosystems for current and future, generations. And so this is our work. It's not a short game, it's a long game, and we're going to outlast a lot of the nonsense that's ongoing today. So I just want to, I think we share in a goal. We're going to stay focused on that. I also want to just make a few points about, what I think we aspire to be. And yes, we're a science-based organization in the sense that we are science-based in our work, but I think we're humble in the understanding that we need to be more inclusive of things like community science and traditional knowledges and other ways of knowing, and be culturally respectful in our work. So it's something we aspire to do as part of our work. And I will also say that we understand, biodiversity exists everywhere. It doesn't have borders or geographic boundaries here in this state. And so we also need to understand what it means to sustain biodiversity in working lands and in other complementary lands, including urban settings. So, we know biodiversity we're part of it. We can't separate ourselves from it. And so we have to look at it everywhere that it is. And then finally, I would just want to say that we're not here as a group to be prescriptive. We're not top down in the sense of trying to be prescriptive about what are the best approaches. I think really we want to reflect and amplify your work and your ideas, and we want to know how you see yourself in 30 by 30. Sort of learn what are you doing, what are challenges or barriers are you experiencing, and how we might be able to work together to co-develop and implement solutions. So I think that's a bit of our beginning and our aspiration, but we're just incredibly fortunate to have a great partnership with the California Natural Resources Agency, and to the leadership. Megan Hurdle is our Deputy Secretary for Biodiversity and Habitat there, and Madeline Drake, who's the Assistant Secretary, and this incredibly small team, but is very, very hardworking, and we're so lucky to have them as partners working together to find solutions. And so I'd like to welcome Megan to make some brief remarks about CBN and the work we're doing together.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Wonderful. I really appreciate that awesome introduction, and just right back at you and CBN for all of the partnership to get this work done. And I just wanted to say your opening remarks about the mission and vision and objectives of CBN really resonated for me, right? It's part of what we talk about here at CNRA is that 30 by 30 is an achievement for biodiversity, but people are at the heart of it, right? And we need to do it in a way that includes equity, diversity, inclusion, that centers tribal partnership, and that works across the many landscapes of California to protect biodiversity, both in urban areas, working lands, across all of the places that has made California what it is. So thank you for those inspiring remarks. And I know I don't have much time here, but I did just want to take a moment to acknowledge how integral CBN has been since the start of 30 by 30 in California. It's a little bit hard to believe that it's been 5 years since the executive order, but I was reflecting back on just how closely the state has worked with the CBN, both in the creation of the strategy that continues to drive how we do 30 by 30 in California, but also in the creation of Appendix D. And it'd be interesting if we still had the Mentimeter up, Megan, to see how many people have taken a moment to read Appendix D of the Pathways to 30 by 30 report. But it is an incredible compilation of the science and direction and questions that we need answered to be really able to achieve 30 by 30 in a way that's equitable, that is managing and protecting biodiversity. So what an amazing contribution at the outset of 30 by 30. But CBN's work doesn't stop there. We continue to work very closely together. We have an annual partnership summit. For folks who haven't had a chance to attend that, CBN has always hosted part of that. You've shown up and done webinars. You did a full day 2 years ago in Riverside, really creating a space and a venue for folks in this partnership, CBN and broader, to come together to talk about these important issues. And I do just also want to point out many of the side meetings that CBN hosts through the roundtables, whether that's on working lands or Indigenous co-stewardship, creating spaces to have the important conversations and to provide direction to the state and to others who are implementing 30 by 30 on how we can do this better and smarter and more effectively. So finally, just to give CBN one last kudos, we are very lucky to have June Bondo as part of our Partnership Coordinating Committee. This is a group of appointed folks, appointed by Secretary Crowfoot, who meet monthly with me and the team at CNRA to talk about 30 by 30 and to provide guidance on how it can be better implemented across the state. And we've just been really grateful for her service, as well as Dr. Alvarez's service prior to her holding that role for CBN on the PCC. So just to wrap up, we like to say that 30 by 30 in California is a big tent movement. And when I think about that, CBN is really part of the fabric of that tent. You are helping us and helping all of California achieve our shared goal of 30 by 30 and beyond, as you set up so nicely, Steve. So we won't get to that 5 million acres without you. So thank you so much for the work you're doing and for holding this town hall to continue to adapt and grow.
Thank you, Megan. I appreciate those comments, and we can definitely see about asking some additional questions to find out who has been looking at the Pathways document and Appendix D. Whoops, sorry, hold on just a second. Hitting the wrong button. Okay, next. One of the questions we get a lot is, how is CBN different? You know, a lot of organizations are doing biodiversity and conservation in this space. So our colleague Liz, I'm going to invite her to talk to you a little bit about how does CBN relate to other biodiversity conservation organizations.
Yeah, thanks so much, Megan Jennings. And I say that because I wanted to just say that before we get as a group into some more detail and updates from our CBN roundtables and more about what CBN is up to, I think in the spirit really of that big tent 30 by 30 movement that Megan Hurdle just referenced, we wanted to start here by just taking a moment to acknowledge our partners. And that's because one of the really exciting roles I think that the California Biodiversity Network can play as a network is it has the potential to hold a super coalition sort of role. And what that really means is that through leveraging not just each one of us participating here and throughout the year today, participating here today and throughout the year, we can also have leverage the amplified power of the networks that we each bring to this table. And by doing so, help really serve a role in California as a coalition of coalitions that can coordinate, can complement, and can elevate the work that we're all collectively doing, and that is so important today. And so in that spirit, I'm just going to talk about 2 of many such examples of how this is functioning with the CBN today. One that we wanted to talk about because of its timeliness, because of COP16 or the UN Biodiversity COP that happened this October. Many of us within the California Biodiversity Network, perhaps many of you, this is another question. I love Padlet. There's so many questions that we could ask or may ask in the future about how many of you may have participated in the UN Biodiversity COP, but certainly many on the CBN Steering Committee. Our CNA, our awesome CNRA partners, also participated. A bunch of our elected officials in California participated in the UN Biodiversity COP this fall. And so we just wanted to make a quick reference to this as something really important that the CBN is engaged in and may or may not be on your radar. So the UN Biodiversity COP is analogous to the climate COP, which you may be more familiar with, and was focused this fall on the implementation of 23 targets of what's called the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, one of which is probably very familiar to us all in California, thanks to the great work of our CNRA partners, and that is 30 by 30. And so within this space, one such partnership entity, the California Global Biodiversity Working Group, and don't be confused, it does have a similar name, but it's a different and complementary entity, helped coordinate a delegation from California. It was tremendous. It was over 100 participants, mostly from the state, but partners in other states and other places that also wanted to participate. And so that we had a coordinated presence together at the Global Biodiversity COP, where we were able to present on a multitude of panels. We presented in press conferences. We distributed materials that shared the work of the CBN and the work that we're doing across California with people on the global stage. Now, in the sense of this, in the spirit of this coordinating role, I sit on the steering committee of both the Global Working Group and the CBN, so that I'm able to help coordinate these different but really complementary networks and the really important work that we're all doing together. Now, another partnership that I can highlight in the very, very similar vein is the California Landscape Stewardship Network, which is way down the line in thinking in really concrete terms of metrics and impact, and how these super coalitions can function, how they can be funded, how they can communicate the work of coalitions, which sometimes can be so difficult to put into terms that funders and supporters can understand. And our partners at the California Landscape Stewardship Network are way down the road and even publishing papers that talk about the tangible impact of coalitions. And I just want to acknowledge that's another partnership. We've invited them to our stewardship roundtable to present, and we're going to continue to cultivate these sort of super coalition partnerships through efforts like these. And I just want to close my comments by saying just this morning, I was in an external partnership meeting in a different context, talking with the IUCN, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, about some of these global issues. And there was a lot of concern there about a global shift at the national government level, away from a focus on prioritizing things we care about a lot here, like biodiversity and climate. And we were discussing ways that we can continue to collaborate and engage, that we don't lose this momentum we've all been generating in California, especially on conservation action. And the point was made very, very strongly, and I want to share it with you all here, that right now, more than ever, the role of action at the subnational level, so that means, of course, states like California and cities, but also coalitions like this one, like the California Biodiversity Network, that coordinate conservation professionals and efforts, are more important than ever at this moment. So in that vein, we're super inspired to see you all here today. We hope you'll join us if you haven't already, and I'm going to pass back to Megan Jennings.
Great. Thank you, Liz, for sharing that. And I'd invite you, if you are part of other organizations that you think we should be connecting with, or you're not sure if we are, please let us know. And I'm going to share with you how we want to get some feedback from you. So please do put any questions you have into the Q&A box, but we're also going to use this Padlet. So I'm going to copy this and put it into our chat real quickly so that you can follow me along here. So this is a space both for you to ask questions, like over here on the right-hand side, but also to make some comments or give suggestions about what you would like to see. And I'm introducing this now because you may hear some things coming up about our CBN structure or about our roundtables that trigger some ideas for you that you want to share as we go. So how this works, there's some instructions over here on the left-hand side about how to contribute. You can add a whole new card by clicking on this button here. You can type a subject in here, and then you can publish it, or you can ask a question of other folks that they can answer. So I can publish that. Oh, I'm going to be a friendly puma. I like that. I like carnivores. So you can put those in here. And then if you see something you just want to add a comment to, I like this idea. You can type it right into a comment there, and then you can publish that. You can also like things. So lots of different ways to interact, but we encourage you, there's a few simple prompts here. Things may be related to the roundtables that we're going to share a little bit more information about those in a minute. Maybe about things that are happening across the network, anything else you want to add, suggestions, but then are there specific questions you have? So you're welcome to either use that Q&A box. I'm going to delete this friendly puma post so it doesn't clutter things up, but you can either, like I said, click this button at the top, type some comments here at the bottom, and this will give you opportunity to ask questions. You're still welcome to put those questions into the Q&A box. I'm not going to keep sharing this. This is the space for you all to contribute, but we're going to revisit this with a panel at the end to look at your feedback and your questions and see if we can talk through some of that and come up with some ideas for how we can grow and expand to meet your needs. So to roll out a little bit more about how CBN works and a little bit more about the structure, especially because some of you are here to learn more about that, I'm going to have my colleague June tell a little bit about how the pieces of CBN interact and how we work together to make the magic happen. Go ahead, June.
Thanks, Megan, and thanks everyone for joining us for this town hall. And thank you all for being members of California's biodiversity community. To echo Liz Chamberlain's comments, we are entering a period of greater national and global uncertainty, and the work of this community has never been more important. The world is counting on California, and California is counting on each of us. I also want to take a moment to thank Lisa Maroon from San Diego State University for putting together the graphics I'll be speaking to in these next 3 slides. This first slide explains CBN roles and structure. As you've heard, one goal of this town hall is to clarify and refine how we intend CBN to work with your input. It's important we're transparent and that there are clear expectations so you can decide where you want to invest your time and effort as part of the network. That starts with establishing a common understanding of the moving parts and their roles. The steering committee's primary role is to help coordinate and connect. This includes communication with the California Natural Resources Agency and other agencies and organizations like the Wildlife Conservation Board. The steering committee also assists with information sharing and planning across roundtables. And the steering committee has a guidance function. This includes adapting the mission and vision of CBN and helping to clarify our roles. It includes conducting strategic planning to set big picture goals for the CBN's development and impact, and seeking funding, for example, from the Moore Foundation, to enable achievement of those goals. The steering committee's guidance role also includes leading cross-network efforts. I want to recognize Rachel Olaf-Yang's critical role as our technical science lead on the steering committee in supporting and guiding the work of the steering committee. Next on this slide, roundtables are where our communities of practice convene. They're for information sharing and identifying gaps the CBN can collaborate to inform biodiversity conservation. Currently, the roundtables focus on 4 thematic topics, which I'll address in a following slide. Next on this slide are working groups. We've been doing this in practice, but haven't formally described these in the past. These are intended to be ad hoc groups that assemble for a specific purpose and then disband when a product or task is complete. These are smaller groups made up of volunteers who take on responsibility for accomplishing the work. We'll be sharing some examples of working groups shortly. Lastly, the equity forum is not necessarily a forum, but really the idea that we want to consider and integrate equity in all we do. Since CBN was formed, we've held 2 large equity-themed convenings. One supported the development of the Pathways to 30 by 30 strategy, specifically Appendix D of the strategy, and the other addressed lessons learned in co-stewardship of public lands. Over the past year and a half, CBN has evolved our equity work away from focusing on holding large equity-themed events every couple of years to instead focus on integrating equity into the work of the CBN every day. A few ways we're doing that are by integrating equity into our strategic planning process and the goals of the roundtables. We're also adapting CBN outreach and engagement. Today's webinar is reflective of this effort. And we'll be pursuing some resources for training in inclusive leadership and communications. Next slide, please. This slide shows how the network interacts. Communities of practice in the roundtables are at the heart of what CBN does. Ideas, experiences, and challenges are shared in roundtables, and often that's where we begin to identify the need for working groups to tackle different tasks. Working groups may connect to just a single roundtable, but sometimes working groups span multiple roundtable needs and priorities and involve members from multiple groups. The Steering Committee and Equity Forum are there to support and connect this work. The Steering Committee works to make sure roundtable and working group efforts are complementary and connected. And the Steering Committee helps communicate CBN activities and their value. The Equity Forum is there to help ensure we are considering equity in our roundtable and working group activities, but also to help coordinate activities across the network to address cross-cutting issues. I draw your attention to 3 takeaways here. First, the roundtables are at the heart of CBN's work. Second, these roundtables, which are open to all, are the primary places where we identify needs and opportunities for CBN to contribute to biodiversity solutions. And third, equity is an active process and practice across CBN. Next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, we currently have 4 roundtables that are supporting different communities of practice. They focus on the themes of biodiversity informatics and community science, a Sentinel site network, stewardship, and conservation planning. Based on your input, some roundtables may expand or shift focus. We may also establish additional roundtables. You'll be hearing more from roundtable chairs and co-chairs shortly. But first, we wanted to give you an idea of how we're thinking about and connecting our efforts in working groups to accomplish tasks and goals. So now we'll hear from Jeanette Howard, who will share the work of an ongoing working group focused on doing a biodiversity assessment to help guide progress toward the 30 by 30 goal. Over to you, Jeanette.
Thanks, June. Hey, everybody. As Megan Hurdle mentioned, we're 5 years in to our 30 by 30 goals. And so we're halfway to the finish line. And so this working group was formed to really take stock of where we are and the idea of setting the stage for the next 5 years. So the working group convened to better understand how 30 by 30 conservation lands, that is the lands that are considered Gap 1 and Gap 2, are meeting biodiversity, access, and climate change objectives. And our hope is that the analysis will provide a clearer picture of where we are and how to focus the next 5 years. Someone mentioned earlier, I think it was Rachel, that the recent Pathways to 30 by 30 California that came out in September 2024 show that 25% of California is currently considered within 30 by 30, and that's that dark green color here on the map. The light green color are other lands that are protected, and then the non-colored lands, the white gray lands, are not conserved lands. So our analysis was not intended to take the place of CA nature, but to complement that in tracking progress toward the state's goals. And so we did that by using the best publicly available statewide data sets to really provide insight of how what we have within 30 by 30 now, what we're missing, and what's surprising. I mean, that's what we're really looking forward to. So you can go to the next slide, Megan. So we used a lot of different biodiversity data sets, including major and fine-scale terrestrial habitat types, to answer various questions around the composition of 30 by 30 lands, to look at representation and gaps. And then we're looking at progress of 30 by 30 since the first Pathways came out a couple of years ago. So since the beginning of this effort, what have we been achieving and where are the progress towards our goals? So the data that we have compiled can be summarized in a lot of ways, and we'll be summarizing it for geographic scope, ecoregions, counties, etc. And we're really hoping that the resulting data will be available. We'll be able to be providing and informing movement around the state's biodiversity under the 5th climate assessment. We're hoping that maybe this assessment can help inform and guide Prop 4 funding and also state wildlife action plans. So the working group met for the first time in early November, and we've met since then twice, and we had robust and really productive discussions around data and methods. And by mid-January, we had preliminary results. And so you can go to the next slide, Megan. And this is just one of the results and how we summarize the data around the 20 ecoregions in the state and what is considered protected under 30 by 30 in the dark green, what are other conserved lands, the light green, which are not the GAP 1 and 2, and then the other non-conserved lands. So we have tons of data, tons of results that we're going to be compiling into a report with the intended audiences of CNRA, WCB, local landowners, and communities to help we're really hoping this can direct strategies, priorities, and funding to meet 30 by 30 goals moving forward. So in closing, I just want to say what's been really successful with this working group was, I think, what made it successful so far is a clear purpose. We've had really great participants, willing participants. We've had subject matter and technical experts who are willing to dig in and discuss data gaps, data needs, and have really honest and robust conversations, which has been great. And really who are willing to commit time and energy into running analyses and providing results really efficiently and clearly. And so we will be sharing the data, the report, and slide decks as we move forward to the various roundtables, and we'll be working on appropriate products moving forward. So thanks very much for your time. It's been a real joy working with everyone on this working group to get this done, this really important analysis done. So thanks very much.
Thanks for sharing that, Jeanette. Glad to see the work that working groups are putting forward, and I'm sure everyone's looking forward to seeing the results of that, which we'll share out later. So first, I want to say thank you all so much. Oops, sorry, I didn't click these things at the top here. I want to say thank you all so much. I see a lot of activity in the Padlet, so that's wonderful. We're going to go through a little bit about the roundtables, and then we may take a few minutes just to see if there's any questions we want to address, and then we'll integrate your feedback into the last piece. So we have an opportunity to hear from each of our roundtable leads about what they've been doing and what they see in the next few months coming up. So I'm going to hand it first to Sam to talk about the Systematic Conservation Planning Roundtable.
Thanks, Megan. So I'm Sam Veloz. Like I said, I co-chair the Systematic Conservation Planning Roundtable with Kristen Bird from the USGS Western Geographic Science Center. Probably this may sound like jargon to you, but what systematic conservation planning is actually a process in which interested parties come together and co-develop conservation goals, and then try to look for actual data that would help inform the current status of and conservation opportunities for those conservation targets, and then using often scientific methods or other models or other processes to come up with conservation plans that most efficiently achieve those targets. And then ideally you're coming together to implement those and see how you did based on that data. You can go ahead to the next slide, Megan. So that's kind of what systematic conservation planning is. But what we're focusing on in the roundtable is we've been doing a lot of work to develop a shared understanding of what complementary conservation measures are and how they can contribute to the non-area-based 30 by 30 goals with a focus on working lands. And so everybody, when they hear 30 by 30, thinks about that 30% of the area protected. And we forget that in the state strategy, there's also a lot of work that's happening outside of the protected area network. And those can actually be contributing meaningfully to our biodiversity goals. So that's definitely been a focus of our roundtable. In terms of who participates, We have a really diverse group of folks who attend the meetings. They include representatives from federal and state agencies, academic scientists, nonprofit representatives, and working lands practitioners, given the work we're doing. And we really do encourage lots of people to come join our meetings. Next slide, Megan. So some of the accomplishments that we've done, we've had a lot of guest experts come and talk to our roundtable meetings, some of which focused on what does it mean to be a protected area? How do we classify them? How does this relate to sort of the global notion of other effective area-based conservation measures? You may have heard of OECMs. But more specifically, to get at our targeted question, we've conducted 20 interviews with working lands practitioners across California to understand their perspectives on 30 by 30. And then last spring, we held a workshop where we brought people together across the state, and we really tried to understand what are the barriers to engaging to 30 by 30 and what are some of the solutions that we can have to overcome those barriers. Next slide, Megan. And so what we're doing now going forward is we're taking that input and we're writing a white paper that is targeted as guidance for CNRA to see how they and other state agencies can ensure complementing conservation measures on working lands are best contributing to 30 by 30 goals. We're also getting several working groups together from the roundtable that are focusing on specific things like logic models, theories of change for what we're doing, and coming up with explicit biodiversity indicators and metrics. And finally, we did do a survey of our roundtable participants just recently, and some of the things that they're interested in doing going forward are having joint meetings with the other roundtables, looking at new approaches for conservation planning, and connecting up with the global biodiversity efforts that are underway. And next slide. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to Don Hankins, who's the co-chair of the Stewardship Roundtable.
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, Don Hankins at California State University, Chico, and also with the Indigenous Stewardship Network. I co-chair this Stewardship Roundtable with Liz Chamberlain, who you've heard from previously. Next slide, please. So our Stewardship Roundtable is a community of practice that brings together professionals and working on land and water stewardship of protected area networks and working lands within California. We have over 350 individuals across the state who've subscribed to our roundtable, including folks from non-governmental organizations, local governments, land trusts, academic places, community groups, land stewards, and also our tribal governments and tribal organizations. Every month we convene, or every other month we convene, and there's about 50 to 60 people who routinely come to those meetings. In fact, some of you are on the call today. I have here, just if you're interested in learning more about our who's involved and where they're coming from, there's a QR code there that you can scan and learn a little bit more about the folks through our slide deck. Go ahead and move to the next slide, please. Over the last year, we've had a number of different accomplishments that we've been able to pursue. One is that obviously we've been able to continue to grow our community of practice through that slide deck that I had on the previous slide. But one of the things that we really worked towards was having and sponsoring an Indigenous co-stewardship workshop, which was also hosted and sponsored by Great and Rancheria. That was a really well-attended workshop that brought together people not only from California, but also national and international leaders in Indigenous stewardship and co-stewardship examples were shared there. And then we also had a working group that came together around stewardship workforce development. And that group ultimately worked to analyze opportunities for workforce training and built a training database, such as a QR code here for you to access that database. And then also this past fall had a special convening called Breaking Silos and Taking Action. There's a link to the document that came from that that's really focused on the workforce development side of things. And then last month in December, we submitted a roundtable feedback to the Wildlife Conservation Board on strategic plan with help from Joe Harvey for compiling that information. And then next slide, please. So in terms of our future plans, we continue and plan to continue to grow our network of folks that are involved in the community of practice, adding folks to our slide deck, so to speak. And we have specific interest in having kind of focused deep dives into how do we cultivate an ethic of stewardship across all sectors, which includes connecting with urban conservation interest, and really making this so that all citizens can be part of this effort, and across all sectors, like I was saying, so urban, agricultural, tribal, and then special topics like fire and water and things like that are some of the things that we're thinking about. And then the ultimate plan from those kind of deeper dives is to develop some products, if you will, for building a greater sense of understanding and awareness of those issues. And I'll pass it along from there. Thank you.
Hi, everyone.
Rebecca.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rebecca Johnson again, and I am one of the co-chairs of the Community Science and Biodiversity Informatics Roundtable. You can see we have a large group of folks that work together to coordinate the work of this roundtable. And our work really emerged from Appendix D, this roundtable, like the others, but with the recognition that there are many types of biodiversity data that currently maybe aren't being used to help answer these big questions that about biodiversity that we've heard about in the earlier parts of this talk. Primarily community collected data and Natural History Museum collections data. And so that's why we have this long title, because it's really about those types of data. And I'll talk with you a little bit about some of the things that we've done. Next slide. So really, we are a community of practice, and our goal is to support that community. And we're a community that the members are a diverse group of folks, but we really do a few different things. We're folks that work in the collection of biodiversity data through community science. And we want to have a community of practice that cooperates to gather these data via community science. So to think about how we can collaborate to increase the number of people, the number of places that we collect these data, and really think about the ways that we engage people in collecting biodiversity data and work to make community science more inclusive, and work together to think about how we can elevate community questions through community science. We also work together to coordinate the understanding of the biodiversity of California and the collection of these species occurrence data, really in the form of community collected data and museum specimen data. So how can we not only coordinate the collection of those data, but think about how we interpret and share those data? That's the informatics part. And one of the things that we also have been doing is coordinate thinking about how we can share these types of data with the state. And together, we are a group of community science program managers and practitioners, biodiversity scientists, academics, community scientists, folks who gather biodiversity data, and folks who use biodiversity data, kind of in a nutshell. And our goal is to meet quarterly with community of practice kind of discussions and topics of discussing different kinds of topics. Next slide. So some of the things that we've done, one is building this community and working together to hold these meetings so we can share information about projects and about work that we're doing. And then one of the other things that we've done, it's not directly work of the roundtable, but it includes many, many people who are part of the roundtable. And so sometimes it's a little complicated to explain. But, if we've heard about Appendix D that really suggested a lot of the science that was needed to meet 30 by 30 goals. And one of the projects that a subset of us is endeavoring on with funding from the Moore Foundation is to build a pipeline to share community collected data with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. So this partnership is led by Lizzie Edson on my team, and it's made up of the California Academy of Sciences, the Biogeographic Data Branch of CDFW, and iNaturalist. And we're working to build a way to share all of those community collected data on iNaturalist with the state. So it was by having Appendix D and having this system that we were able to secure this funding to create a first of its kind network for this sharing with the state of California. So this is related to the roundtable, and we talk about this work in the roundtable and share updates, but it's kind of like adjacent work to the roundtable. But I thought it was really important to share that work with all of you. So next slide. And so our future plans are to continue to hold roundtable meetings. We are currently in the planning stages to have an upcoming meeting about eDNA data. I know this is of great interest to our roundtable members. So we have an announcement of that date coming soon. And the last time we surveyed our members, we heard that people really want to have workshops. And so we have 2 slots for workshops in the upcoming year. So if you fill out this link using this QR code, you can all help suggest topics for workshops. We would love your input. And we're hoping in the summer to have a meeting in advance of California Biodiversity Day or Biodiversity Week in September, so we can help the state plan for that work. And we are also really interested in, like many of other people have shared, about working with other roundtables, and we've had a meeting with the Sentinel Site Network. So thinking about how we can build on that work and then continuing adjacent work. And I am done, and we'll turn it over to Gary.
Okay, well, thank you, Rebecca. And I'm Gary Bocciarelli again. I am the chair of the Sentinel Site Network Roundtable, and I have the pleasure of working with Whitney Albright from California Department of Fish and Wildlife, who's going to jump on here in a second, and Dina Spatz with California State Parks. And really, this roundtable is focused on understanding biodiversity data and climate data across the state and doing it in a standardized way. And I think that's the major distinction. I'll jump into some of the details. We're not going to go all the way into the details. We'll give you some outlets to check out. And if you have questions, of course, just connect with us. But to start, I'll give it to Whitney, and next slide for her, please.
All right, thanks, Gary. Well, you kind of said it here in a nutshell. The focus of this roundtable has really been to create this community of practice to support development of a standardized long-term climate and biodiversity monitoring network in California. And the goal is really to establish the network, as Gary mentioned, across the state and across different ecosystem types to monitor how the climate is changing in real time and the associated impacts to biodiversity. And the reason for doing this is to provide science that ultimately can aid in better protection and stewardship of the state's natural resources. And we also see the network as a tool to help evaluate the success of the 30 by 30 effort and then adapt our conservation goals and practices as needed. So in other words, we're protecting this land through this effort, but can we really confirm that it's resulting in the biodiversity related benefits that we intend? So to date, we've really been working towards these goals by bringing diverse groups together to inventory current data sets and sources and gaps, share best practices, and going forward, hopefully identify different shared resource opportunities, all working towards this goal of expanding and scaling up the Sentinel Site Network. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Gary. He's going to talk a little bit more about these groups and this community of practice in the next slide.
Yeah, thanks, Whitney. And I should just say, so the Sentinel Site Network is a network of sites that are sort of spread across the state, and this effort to do standardized monitoring across them is adapted from the CDFW cannabis program. And Lindsay Rich and her team really leading that effort. So a huge thank you to them for sort of laying the groundwork, so to speak, figuratively and literally. And right now, what's happening is CDFW has, as a part of the Sentinel Site Network, 39 active sites where there's biodiversity monitoring. And the UCNRS, we will be rolling out our 39 sites in the next year and a half plus. So it's a very exciting time. And I think there's a lot of incredible work that will happen. And a huge shout out to CDFW and the cannabis program for helping to fund the NRS rollout of these sites. It's a great partnership. I feel really lucky to be a part of it. It's very exciting time, as I said. So some of these accomplishments, aside from getting these sites set up and the equipment out, which there are specific protocols that are a part of the field monitoring program and data processing. You can use that QR code to check them out. We've been meeting as a group, this sort of roundtable, also known as a community of practice, with all sorts of different groups since 2022, and working with land managers to understand how to deploy this equipment and, potential issues or any concerns or questions. And the idea there is that the end users of these data that are collected from this instrumentation are the community members, really interested in how we can apply biodiversity data for conservation purposes, linking it to 30 by 30 goals and helping us understand how we're doing protecting those lands, but also understanding how climate change is affecting our biodiversity in the state. Other accomplishments listed there, I just want to particularly state that there is a website now. It's a work in progress for the California Sentinel Site Network. And ideally, as we start to flesh that out, it will be a site where people can go for more information and learning how to join the Sentinel Site Network. Next slide. And just wrapping up, there's a lot of overlap in our roundtables. And so I'm going to hit on a few that you might have heard earlier, but we're really focusing on building these working groups, and we'll be meeting next week. If people are interested, please join the Sentinel Site Network roundtable, and we will email you information. But trying to address analytical questions that focus on eDNA, genomics, urban biodiversity, and biodiversity metrics that also tie into the global biodiversity framework. We hope to meet monthly to discuss these topics and design studies that can lead us into these analytical questions, and then hopefully bring us all together for a 3-day workshop in the near future. And I'll end there and turn it back over to Megan.
Thank you all so much for those updates on the roundtables. I saw there was a question about how you can join. We'll have a QR code at the end, but you can find out more about these and get on the mailing list through our website as well. So encourage you to join if you see something there that speaks to you. I see a few questions coming through, but I think they may be things that we best deal with in the panel. Some questions about how do we work better with private landholders, and what is the role, or how do we, work together to be effective in our conservation, maybe using state and local lands, given the change in the federal political landscape. So I think what I'd like to do is just go ahead and introduce our panel, and we'll start to tackle some of those questions. If you have other questions that we haven't addressed yet, I know Rachel's busy addressing some, and we'll pause in a minute to ask if there's anything that hasn't been answered, but I do want to introduce our panel. And in the meantime, please keep adding to that Padlet. And if you're having trouble with the Padlet, go ahead and put something in the Q&A or the chat, and we will get to you. So now is a time for feedback from you and to have a bit of a panelist discussion. Since we have so many folks here, we thought it'd be nice to just have a few folks talk over, what we're hearing from you. And we've had the great privilege of having assistance in setting up this webinar and thinking about how we expand our partnership with another working group. And this working group is focused on partnerships. And so I'd like to introduce my colleagues who are going to join for this panel: Chance Cutrano, Leela Higgins, John O'Niles, and Miguel Ordeñana. And I'll let them do a quick intro. And so what I'm going to ask of you all, and maybe I'll just go in the order that you're on my slide, is to have you introduce yourself briefly. And I want to have you each take a quick second to mention what brought you to CBN in the first place and what were you looking for. So I'll start with you, Chance.
Yeah, thank you so much, Megan. Hi, everyone. Chance Cutrano, he, him, his pronouns. I'm Director of Programs at the Resource Renewal Institute, located in what is now Marin County, ancestral lands of the Coast Miwok. And what brought me to CBN is our organization has done a lot of work in partnership with rice farmers and other landowners in the Sacramento Valley. And noticing that there are a lot of different incentive programs, I was trying to create spatial tools to see how different incentives, both private or nonprofit, and as well as public incentives stacked on top of each other, and where were there gaps in the landscape around conservation, specifically bordering public lands or wildlife reserves. And so in developing those tools, I stumbled upon the Systematic Conservation Planning Roundtable, and ultimately plugged in there as the first place within CBN to start sharing my ideas for tools, but also getting a sense of best practices within that larger community. And I'll pass it to Leela.
Hi, everyone. My name is Leela Higgins. I use they, them pronouns. I am the co-senior manager for community science at the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County, and also the co-founder and co-director of the City Nature Challenge. I first joined CBN because I was looking to do kind of three things, like to deepen my knowledge of 30 by 30 and to take action around 30 by 30. I was looking for community and also for network, building that through joining. And I was also looking to amplify and find linkages for our individual and collective work across California. I joined the Community Science Roundtable first. And I'm going to pass it over to Jono.
Good afternoon, everyone. Nice to meet you all. Thank you so much to the presenters on the roundtable. What brought me to CBN is I've been at my role. I'm the VP at the San Diego Natural History Museum, and we have adopted a new strategy that is trying to use our voice and our collections in science much more for conservation. And a big part of that is going to be how we can do better partnerships, something we talk about, embedding equity, workforce development, just longer, deeper ways of working together. So real excited for this kickoff town hall for me. I'm quite new to the California landscape and already learning a lot. So thanks.
And let's pass it to Miguel. Miguel, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. My name is Miguel Liñana, he, him pronouns, also with the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County. And I am co-senior manager of community science with Leela Higgins. And I'm excited to be part of this. Yes, kind of to learn more about 30 by 30, how myself as a environmental professional of color, as a community science practitioner, as somebody who does a lot of focus on urban wildlife research and community engagement in urban areas. How do I and the communities that I try to represent and support fit into this? And hopefully my presence in this space kind of amplifies their voices and allows people that have historically been excluded from these types of conversations and convenings feel like they have a place. And hopefully my first step is figuring out how I have a place and a space in this. And I help lead programs looking at bats and things like that are looking at urban wildlife in urban communities. But how can we do community science differently and think about the whole process of community engagement kind of as an equal priority to the data collection, the data that can come out of community science. And so I feel like starting these conversations early on and putting them front and center before we start talking about the rich data that we can extract from urban communities, to not see these communities as tools or just participants, but an integral part of the conservation effort of 30 by 30 and how to sustain that effort beyond 2030. So I'll stop there.
Thank you all so much for your dedicating time, especially Miguel and Leela, who continue to commit time during a very tumultuous time where they live in LA. So appreciate you guys being here and helping to, expand the voices and help incorporate these voices into what we're doing. So we just want to take a moment and introduce that the town hall was not the start of this collaboration for these folks to join and work on a working group with us, but rather at the 30 by 30 gathering in Sacramento this past fall, we had a special session in the afternoon and had assistance from the panelists you see here today to ask some questions of people about what aren't we getting to yet, or what conversations do we need to have. And I'm seeing a lot of comments in the Padlet about recreation and urban biodiversity, and Like those are the beginnings of the things that we heard. So this is a quick word cloud. We kind of had two different focuses of the conversation. One was about gathering, how do we gather biodiversity knowledge to get to 30% protected? So those are counting the areas that count for the 30 by 30 metric. So you can see some things like education, biodiversity index, mapping tools, prioritization. But then another important part of the conversation, I saw a question earlier about what is the other conservation areas? Well, I think we need to have more conversations about that because there aren't explicit metrics. And so there was a lot of conversation about education, indigenous knowledge, public engagement, funding, urban biodiversity, and working lands were a big part of this conversation. So I just wanted to set the stage that we've heard some, but we recognize not everybody was able to attend that. So I'm going to turn off the screen sharing. I just wanted to share that kind of context that we've started the conversation, and today is an opportunity to continue. And I know we can turn to the Padlet for some more specific questions, but I just wanted to pose to the panel, you know, what have you heard either in that event or, you know, if you've been looking at the Padlet, you know, about things that people are commenting on about, you know, where do we need to move into different spaces to make sure we're really addressing some of the challenges as well as the full scope of goals of 30 by 30? Like, what do you see as the next opportunities? And you know, do you have thoughts about how we can start to get there together? And I'll open it to any of you. That's kind of a big question. I like to just throw loaded questions out there.
I'll give it a start. I think what I've been hearing, including in our last convening that was in person, was that thinking about partnerships and in urban communities. And I mean, I think we were kind of categorizing kind of some of these areas that sometimes a community's only connection to nature as complementary conservation areas. And I think for some people that didn't sit well, and because it seemed like a step below a really important conservation area somewhere else than a traditional kind of open space. And so I feel like if that's the message we're sending off the bat, it's already going to exclude a lot of communities. So I think reemphasizing the value of urban communities and that how diverse these urban communities are as far as interests and concerns, and starting there with listening sessions that are just really kind of open-ended questions about what matters to you. And then it's up to us to kind of make the connections about, hey, how do the concerns of these communities overlap with 30 by 30 goals, or how can we make it overlap with 30 by 30 goals if they're not kind of already thought about already. So that's something where I like to, and I'm already, and Leela and I and similar programs are always trying to use that growth mindset about how we can engage with communities better and more equitably, addressing language justice, environmental justice, all types of injustices that these communities are facing that a lot of times are skipped over or kind of barely addressed as scientists are kind of en route to answering those biodiversity questions. And so anyway, we're learning too, and hopefully what we learn as community members, as community science practitioners, we can share so that that can be scaled up to have an impact at the state level. I'll stop there.
So much of what Miguel said resonates with me, but we work really closely, so that doesn't surprise me. I was a note taker at the 30 by 30 gathering for a session on Indigenous leadership. And I think that it was a really powerful conversation. And there were a lot of Indigenous folks there. And I also noticed that there's only one person in the Mentimeter that said that they were from a tribal community. And so, yeah, I'm really wanting to like bring forth and make sure that we continue to uplift Indigenous leadership in this work. From that meeting, the notes I took, I reviewed them before coming here. And the things that really stuck out for me were, you know, the call for addressing harm, addressing the colonization, genocide, ecocide, and the stolen land. And I feel like that's something that we I don't know if we've done very well. And I'm not saying CBN specifically, but like all of our institutions that we work at, I think haven't done that very well. And so uplifting Indigenous traditional ecological knowledge, listening to elders, but other things that were written there, and working to protect ancestors. And then one of the other big pieces that they said is increasing cultural competency. And I feel like that's something that I know Miguel and I work on a lot in our small office in the Natural History Museum, and we work with our partners on, but I think that that's something that we could all do as part of this CBN. We could all work on increasing our cultural competency. And then for the urban biodiversity work, I've seen this in the Padlet as well. I think folks are like really hungry for what can we, 30 by 30, like protecting Chuckwalla and Satitla, amazing. But like, what can we do and how can we share more about 30 by 30 in the urban core where most of the people in the state live, and where, you know, it's really hard for Indigenous folks to get land. It's so expensive here in LA. We work on a project with a local Indigenous school in the Gabriela Shoshone, and they want to get 12 acres of land back, and they're working on land stewardship, and it's Indigenous youth led. And like, how can we have more projects like that showing what conservation in the urban core can look like to like really get more people on board with 30 by 30 and share that and share those successes, and also like for our organizations to learn from Indigenous leadership. So we'll end there too.
Lance or Jono, anything you all want to add?
Yeah, I'll jump in and say at the gathering last fall, I was also a note taker in the afternoon for an integration session and around what is 30 by 30 to all the people that are sitting around the table, because you know, we're 5 years in, but those conversations still come up with many of the people we engage with outside of CBN. But the other piece of it was, you know, what are the elements of integrating our collective efforts that, you know, we need to still do work on. And I think Miguel and Leila touched on some of those elements. Some that came up in the session that I was a part of were similar to things that people were bringing up in the Padlet around, like, how do we, like, who's identifying obstacles? You know, what are the impediments to implementation of 30 by 30 that folks are seeing from their, you know, various perspectives that are unique to them, but also how do we convert those, the idea that some of those things can be obstacles into like actual opportunities or places for further partnership and further refinement. Like who are the folks within our community of practice that are having the greatest success, and where are areas of improvement there? You know, the way that showed up is not only like what are the gaps in data, but who has access to the data to create the tools. And you know, there's a certain amount of power and privilege with that comes with both accessing and repurposing data to create those tools. And those are the sorts of conversations that we were wrestling with within our table, and that allowed us to have, you know, a broader conversation about next steps together, which, you know, as we're talking earlier in this session, you know, we have these roundtables. Are there opportunities where people who have interest can go into a working group and start to work on some of these things together that they're passionate about, and then bring that back to the broader roundtable, and then see how that feeds into things that the Natural Resources Agency is interested in and things like that. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunity available if you want to plug in. There's no shortage of places to plug in.
Well, and thanks for making mention of the working groups, right? Are there working group tasks that you see as something you would like to envision? I'm talking to those of you who are attending and not able to speak at this moment, but, you know, put that into the Padlet. We really want to know what would best serve you, whether it be in a working group or what the roundtables focus on. I saw somebody comment on storytelling, right? It's not just about data and tools, it's about sharing our stories. And so how do we better make space for that so it can be part of what we're doing? And there was also a comment about, you know, bringing people into it. So often we treat things as silos, but we're all part of this interconnected network. Jono, did you have anything you wanted to add?
more reinforce what Miguel and Leila and Chance already said. I mean, I'm a relative newcomer to CBN, but I think the power imbalances of conservation haunt us and will continue to haunt us for a very long time. So I'm really interested in finding tools or colleagues or forum where we can learn how to be better listeners, how to grow our cultural competency, and kind of balance that need to go slow and be careful with, you know, the existential crisis that's also hitting us. So on a personal level, it's trying to figure out a lot of the things that were already mentioned, but then how do I kind of get myself up in the morning and show up at work and try and do better than I did yesterday? So I'm really interested in specific tools or examples where people have led really thoughtful partnerships that are based on listening primarily in areas where we haven't listened. So just real excited to be here and already learning a lot. Megan, did you want to talk a little bit about I don't know, some of the other ideas that we had mentioned as sort of a group getting ready for this, like whether there's other areas to explore as a community of practice, or didn't know if there's sort of a transition that you want to engineer where we can also hear from some of the other folks on the call.
Sure. We have a few more minutes to chat. And, you know, I did want to note, you know, in terms of bringing people in, some of that is asking questions about how we do that. And some of it is about asking questions of who we do that with. And so, you know, Miguel mentioned urban communities and urban biodiversity, and there's a lot of outreach and engagement that goes on, I think mostly outside of CBN, although a lot of folks are bringing it into the community science group. But also, you know, there was somebody asking about working lands, and that happens a bit in Sam's working group. So I'd just be curious, you know, what would you all like to see, or what are some things you'd like to leverage to help sort of bridge that divide to bring more folks in? So it's not just those of us that are practitioners, but, you know, community members are engaged in being able to share their voice for their vision for 30 by 30, because this isn't just for us, right? Biodiversity conservation and 30 by 30. It's ideally for all Californians and, you know, hopefully all in the United States, I guess, whether they care or not. And I know a number of you are actively engaged in some education and outreach, but and maybe that's part of it. But, you know, what would you like to see from CBN to help make space for more of those conversations and collaborations? And I'd maybe start with the panel, unless you guys don't have thoughts about that. Or if you want to answer a question I did not ask, you're also welcome to do that.
And I continue to kind of see like requests and recommendations to really kind of think it's outside the box as far as kind of what questions we address, what we characterize as biodiversity conservation targets. And I think there's a lot of recommendations to look at kind of canopy cover, urban canopy cover, and when you are looking at these questions that overlap with kind of shade equity and other types of issues like that, who are the organizations? Who are the local? Where's the local knowledge exist? Who are these community-based organizations that have been trying to get people's attention and bring people's attention to these issues? And then I think following their lead, I think is the right thing to do once we identify these people who've been on the ground for all this time and uplift their work, and seeing how we can support them best. And yeah, those are listening sessions. Those are doing our homework and working with Indigenous communities and reminding ourselves that Indigenous communities also exist in urban areas, and they have a huge kind of interest in doing biodiversity conservation as well and have a lot to share. I mean, this horrible fire that we're going through right now is a great example of that, how we could, obviously we're not going to go back to what we were after this fire, but kind of figure out, hey, could we can we do things differently next time from a preventative perspective or from a management, from a reactionary perspective? And who are we not hearing from? Whose knowledge that do we need to hear from still to have a better kind of environment is more supportive of all communities, including biodiversity and our natural resources. And so anyway, I'll stop there, but those are things that are coming to mind for me, and what I'm kind of seeing as trends in the chat is like school districts, et cetera. Those are partners that take up a lot of geographic space in urban areas and are starting to sometimes rewild their campuses. And those, yes, are physical spaces that could act as linkages for urban connectivity, but also those are community centers. Those are trusted spaces that can act as this node and have this influence that are far reaching the campus footprint. And so I think that's just an example that I can think of, but yeah, street trees, all those types of things are just little things that we always talk about, but like, what does it really mean to address kind of these issues in a way that is not just thinking about how it serves kind of our climate and pollution but also serve the community that are going to be kind of most affected by any alterations to these landscapes. So anyway, start there.
Thank you, Miguel. I just wanted to comment that, we have a comment in the chat about making sure we bring in social science, and I think that's really critical at this stage, so I appreciate that. And I want to leave enough time to do a quick wrap up. So I guess what I'd like to ask the panelists in sort of a rapid fire, so if you could answer kind of briefly, we have a question about, what do you all think the focus should be in California for biodiversity to thrive after we achieve 30 by 30? And whoever wants to kick it off, and we'll just sort of cycle through you all.
I'll kick it off just because simultaneous to that question coming in, I was also thinking about like the long view, I guess, for all of us here. Like tools can come and go, and we will continue to update data and refine it and all of those sorts of things. And the stories might shift, but like the 30 by 30 will happen, and then we will be on the other side of it. And we need to take the long view. And for me, a lot of that is just continuing to feed this network and nurture this community, because that's the durability we will need, and to continue to build that community and widen the tent, so to speak, to ensure that there are more people that understand the grander vision beyond the checkpoint that we're putting out there as 30 by 30. So that's something that I'm sitting with right now.
Would like to go next?
I think that one of the things, I don't know if it's the top thing, but one of the things I could see happening after achieving the 30 by 30 goal is really like focusing in on community-led conservation and conservation that's run by like large organizations or by the state. Great. Obviously, we can get really high numbers and we can achieve 30 by 30 goals in those ways. But having seen and worked on some local community-led conservation here in LA with Save Elephant Hill and with the Northeast LA Black Walnut Day Coalition, it's just amazing to see and to support and be connected with community members and conserving and protecting the lands that are in their neighborhoods, especially in these neighborhoods that are so urban and so built up. And then like there's these pockets of land that developers are really trying to go after, and how can we support communities who are trying to protect those lands and then turn them into like local parks or turn them into community science sites where we're collecting data. So yeah, really excited about that.
Or Jana, super rapid fire.
Yeah, I think for me, echoing a lot of what's been said, but community-led science will be the norm. And when that happens, we're going to be in a much better spot. How to get there and what that looks like. I think we've heard a little bit from the panel and some of the roundtables for sure. But we have a lot of work to do in 5 years. We have a lot of self-education and self-reflection to do. But I would love to imagine if we get to 30 by 30 that it actually is not a green movement. It's a working people's movement, that people who haven't been at the table making choices, they're being empowered by the more traditional conservation groups that have been out there. So really flipping some of the paradigm on its head. And
Well, did you want to add anything, or should I do our quick wrap up? We got 1 minute. Okay, I'm going to do a quick wrap up. Thank you all so much for your time and thoughtfulness about this. So what do we have coming next? If you know folks who weren't able to join, this Padlet remains open. If you think of things afterwards, it'll remain open into February. We want this to be the place where we continue to gather your input. And as this group was discussing, we want to take that and do something with that. For those of you that have been longtime members of roundtables, we also want your input about what's working for you since you've been involved. You know, we don't want to change things that are effective, but we want to build on and improve. So we'll probably be sending a questionnaire out to those of you who are active participants in roundtables, so stay tuned for that. And then importantly, this group of folks, thank you all so much for your time. They're not just here to help with the town hall and share perspectives on the front end. We're going to synthesize this information that we heard from you, and there's going to be some recommendations to the steering committee for us to think about how we can expand and grow the way that CBN serves you, incorporating some of these ideas about urban biodiversity and working lands and working with communities, which have a lot of power when we harness it correctly, and making sure all of you see yourself in this work, because we won't be successful if we don't all see ourselves in the work. And somebody gave a shout out to, let's not just stop at 30 by 30, let's head for 50 by 50. I'm all in. So, you know, what else comes next for us? So it may look like, you know, some name changes or some new groups, but stay tuned. We'll keep you abreast of how that's evolving, and we'll do a follow-up town hall probably in the spring, and with a goal of implementing some of those recommendations in the summer and fall. So if you want to join our mailing list or sign up for a roundtable, it's been in the chat, but here's a quick QR code for you if you like to do it on your phone. Thank you all so much for your time and attention. I'm really grateful to be part of such a powerful network of people who care a lot, because this matters, especially today with the way things are changing. It matters what we do, and it matters that you're here. So thank you.
wow.
Bye, Dana. Thank you.